Welcome everybody to this latest Travolution COVID-19 webcast. Today we're going to talk to one of the world's biggest travel brands, Expedia, and we're delighted to have Cyril Ranque, who is the President Travel Partners Group at Expedia Group. So welcome, Cyril. Hope you're well.
As well as could be when you're locked down.
Yes.
Almost locked down.
And you're speaking to us from Geneva today.
Correct, yes.
Good. Okay, so from just outside London to Geneva, welcome. Let's start with some insight into the impact this has had on Expedia pre, sort of during and post. Obviously, you came into this as a group with a lot of changes happening already. I mean, some things that maybe you've been forced to do now at greater speed, but obviously we saw Mark, the ex-CEO, go before Christmas, and Barry took over for a short amount of time, and Barry Diller, your chairman, he had some interesting things to say about the business and where it was going. So just give us an idea of what it's been like in the last few months. I mean, you know, you've had that situation, now you go into this global pandemic, and how it's changing what Expedia is and what it does.
Well, I think we recognize that we had to make some changes even before COVID. COVID, accelerated the need for change and to make us a more efficient company. And it also created new needs, which is managing hundreds of millions of cancellations and changes from customers. So these are two big things that happened to us in the last few months. We had to simplify our organization. I think, Barry and Peter were totally right. We've been really heads-on trying to look at everything that we're doing that is not creating a ton of value and not chasing every little idea that we could have. We've had a lot of ideas in the past, but too many competing ideas. So we're really focusing on just providing a great customer experience and great partner experience and simplifying our own organizations. And for that, we did some reorganizations. We combined the supplier teams together into my group, the Travel Partners Group. We combined our platform and marketplaces groups together under John Kim. And we just announced that we combine our retail products organization under Tucker Moody and our marketing organization under Adam J. and Jeff Hurst. So we're really simplifying our own internal orgs in order to better align and just do what we have to do, which is providing great customer and partner experience.
Yeah, so kind of a more consolidated, focused business from your side of things. You're obviously looking after your partners, and that includes a diverse range of suppliers. What difference will they see, do you think? And how should they look to work with you in the future?
I think they should see us working more on automation, more on providing them self-service capabilities that allow them to do the right thing for their customers or for their brands on their own. I'll give you an example. Through the COVID crisis, we built a self-service cancellation process for hotels, so that when a customer doesn't call us for canceling, but calls them directly, they don't have to call us. They can process that cancellation on their own. It's something that we hadn't done in the past, and our partners had asked it, and we've done that. So they should see more automation and the usage of more aggregated data to access customer segments. Also, we're combining data from all our brands together in order to provide partners more targeted capabilities. So there's a ton of value that's going to come from partners, from the simplification of our organization.
Yeah. So we were speaking before we sort of started recording this, and you said what COVID exposed was the lengthy, difficult processes people have to go through just to cancel something, for instance. Which, I mean, in normal times that wouldn't have been flagged as an issue, but suddenly you found yourself having to reverse a whole ton of business that you thought you'd had in the bank, effectively.
Exactly.
And that exposes ridiculous, maybe processes that shouldn't have been in place ever, but that's how it evolved. Correct.
They shouldn't have been in place ever, and this is a great opportunity for us in the industry, as an industry, to simplify some of those processes and automate them. And we were built to process $100 billion of bookings to send people traveling somewhere, not exactly to cancel them in a matter of a few days.
Yeah.
And so were our airline partners and our hotel partners. They were not built for that. Like, as an industry, we've been outgrowing GDP by 2x for I don't know how many years, more than 10 years. So it's all a good growth story. And now we had to go the other way, backwards. And stuff like an airline ticket or a flight being canceled, and us needing to contact the customer to allow them to cancel and refund or issue a credit. These processes were not in place at scale before COVID. And we worked with our airline partners to implement them at scale now. And so for the future, because unfortunately, we all know you've been in the industry for a while, I've been in the industry for a while, there's going to be another hurricane, there's going to be another earthquake, unfortunately, there's going to be another catastrophe or political event. And so we'll have to process these mass cancellation or schedule changes. But I think going forward, it'll be much more automated, much more integrated between us as an OTA and our supply partners.
Yeah. I mean, this is it, isn't it? You're a massive juggernaut of a company in travel. As you said, you're set up to be going forwards all the time, to be making bookings, bringing in revenues. And actually, compared to every other sector, travel has been one where it's been hit the hardest. It was hit the first because that suddenly closed down. But you're not just stopping, you're reversing out of business you've taken in. I mean, it's been an incredible period where you've had to actually unravel a good chunk of business that you've already thought you've got in the bag. I mean, that must be really difficult. Give us some idea how difficult that has been for a large brand like Expedia.
I mean, I don't want to say we've been more impacted than anybody else, but we've been impacted like everybody else, and it is a humbling experience. It starts, I think it's 3 phases, literally for us. The first phase is you got a flood of customers calling you or hitting your sites trying to respond to the policy changes, etc. And you just have to save your customers and do the right thing for them. So that's the first step. 1 was do the right thing for customers. Very, very closely after, we started to think, okay, we've got to do the right thing for our partners also, because we can't leave them out, and we can't just refund customers directly without caring for our partners. So that's where we started to introduce some voucher policies, where instead of offering a refund, we're offering a voucher. So we tried through that first step to balance what the customers' interests were with what our partners' interests were, so that we can keep that industry and ecosystem going. The second step that we focused on was saving ourselves, because to your point, cash flying out the door at the speed of lightning was not something we were used to, and so we had to raise money to cover our expenses, and we also worked on reducing our expenses, reducing our external vendor expenses, and all the little things that we spent money on, we cut as quickly as possible before getting to the employees, of course, which is the thing you want to avoid as much as possible. But we still needed financing, so we secured more than $3 billion of financing, which allows us to, breathe a bit and see the future in a constructive way, not have to do hasty choices that we would regret. So we're really in a good position financially. And now the third thing we're moving towards is, okay, now we've got to rebuild travel. We've got to rebuild travel as a company, but as an industry. And what can we do for customers to let them know that it's safe to travel again? Where is it safe to travel again? What can we do for destinations to put them on the map when they open up? What can we do for partners to give them enough, money and funding to attract customers whenever they come to their destination? So that's the kind of the third step after we managed urgency and saved ourselves.
I know you've just launched a recovery plan, which we'll come on to in a minute. Before we do, just go back to that kind of initial hit of trying to balance the interests of customers on the one hand and partners on the other. Those 2 things can sometimes clash. And I know you had a cancellation waiver program in place, and for some of your big partners, that's probably something they would want to do, and they can bear the brunt of that financially. Although I think everyone's suffering in travel, but you've got a whole range of partners, all the way down to sort of single property owners these days with your alternative accommodation, and that's difficult for them because you're taking effectively decisions on their behalf to give money back to consumers. So just give us a bit more insight into how you've had to manage that. It's great for Expedia to be able to refund their customers because you'll get great brand equity from that, I'm sure. But you've got to look after those partners as well. So that must have been a tricky balancing act.
It's been for a personally humbling experience, because you literally have customers yelling at you on one end saying, "I want my money," and partners yelling at you on the other end saying, "You're gonna make me die, basically, if you don't let me keep those bookings." So there's nothing fun about it, and you've got to be calm and try to understand, what is the most logical and fair approach to take here. And I must say we had some partners, some big global partners like the hotel chains or the airlines that led the way in taking a hit and refunding a lot of customers. So that made it easy for us because they paved the way. They issued some policies until end of April, end of May, end of June, and even the summer. So they showed the path to the industry on doing the right thing for customers, even if it was hard for them or their owners.
Yeah.
So for those that did that, we followed that path and we implemented their policies, and we rewarded for doing the right thing. Rewarded them. So we gave them a sort boost for a year in exchange for doing the right thing for customers. And so we want them to be rewarded for that. Then some other partners had almost no way to accept refunding everyone. And for those, we offered them the option to issue vouchers for them so they can keep those bookings on the books. And these bookings tend to be or vouchers are redeemable over 12 months, so it gives customers time to rebook, but at the property where the initial booking was canceled. Mm-hmm. And the industry kind of split between these two options, and I think this was the most logical and fair approach. There's always imperfections. Some customers are still unhappy because they get vouchers, and some hotels are still unhappy because they get some bookings refunded and all of them on vouchers. Hey, you know what? We have to make speedy decisions in a time of crisis, and I think we're pretty happy with where we landed.
Yeah, I mean, one of the value a lot of agents have shown in this, or intermediaries like yourselves in this situation, is they've got a relationship with the customer. So if there is a conversation about delaying a booking or taking a voucher for a future travel rather than demanding the refund, it's often been the agents that have only been in the position to do that and have that conversation, which wouldn't be possible with the end supplier. So do you think it's going to be difficult to get lots of different experiences out there, but intermediaries and agents in general possibly come out of this with a little bit of credit because they are able to manage that customer relationship in a way that's beneficial to all as much as possible? Difficult circumstances.
You'd hope so. You'd hope the service that we've provided to both customers and partners has created value. I think it has definitely created value in the area of scale. Mm-hmm. I think that's the key, is that the scale that we built on the processing those cancellations, refunds, voucher issues, these things, or informing customers of their options, following government guidelines, that change, as you said, every day. That is only workable by a big technology organization like us. Like, we couldn't do all this by hand. And if you look at all the actors that didn't have our scale, they were inundated with calls and manual processes. And so, to some extent, we're at a level where the cancellations have stabilized, and we're starting to see bookings going up, and it's more back to normal. But I think we as OTAs have helped process the crisis in a much more scalable way than if we hadn't been there.
Yeah. Let's go on to that recovery plan that you sort of started to talk about earlier on. You've announced details this week. A lot of money being invested, a lot of targeted at your hotel partners, but some at destinations as well. Just set out broadly the kind of things that you think you can help with, the kind of investment that you're making.
Yeah, so there's 3 levels to our plans, and when we started to think, okay, now what should we do to revive travel? There were 3 layers really. The first was the industry layer, second the destinations, and third the partners. For the industry, the most important thing we can do as an OTA is to rebuild trust in consumers about travel. And whatever the industry is doing, when you talk about cleanliness, hygiene efforts that hotels, airline, car rental companies, activities companies do, airports, we want to be there. We want to collect that information, and we want to show that to customers who are shopping, to tell them, this is what this industry has done. This is what this industry has implemented, and really sharing the protocols that each part of the travel ecosystem is implementing to make it safe to travel in an environment that will be what it is over the next 18 months. So we're doing that. And the second thing is we're making it easy for customers to book and get and change their plans or get refunded. So we've increased our share of refundable bookings from 50% to 70% on the lodging side. So 70% of all our rate plans are now refundable, fully refundable, which gives confidence to book. So that's really for the travelers to rebuild trust. And what we thought we would do for the industry itself, especially for all the people who've been furloughed or laid off, is to launch what we call the Expedia Group Academy, which is essentially all the training modules that we built for our own teams about industry skills, but also just leadership skills, how to sell yourself, how to manage objections, all these kind of self-building combination of skills. We're just going to make those available to anybody in the industry who wants to take these courses online for free.
Okay, so they were in-house.
Yeah.
Only Expedia people would have known about them or experienced them, but now exactly. you're allowing that out into the wild, and people can just
into
jump
the wild, and as many people can join as they want. Hopefully, it'll help them build some skills and confidence for when they have interviews or they're in a new job, etc. So we're pretty excited about that.
Do they end up there with a sort of an Expedia qualification of some sorts, or is it accredited by somebody? Or
we're looking at this. It's unclear whether it's going to be a perfect certification. Definitely, they'll be able to state on their resume that they followed all these courses. Yeah. Whether we create an accreditation or not remains to be seen. We're launching the program at the end of June, right. So more work. It's actually in the works.
I guess it's hard. It's a global thing, so who accredits it? It'll be different for different countries and regions.
It's totally global, but coming soon. Now, the second thing is for destinations. The difficulty for a destination is whenever the government or their local regulator says we're opening. For them, the question is, how do I make people know that we're open? And so we're working with our destination management organization partners, the tourism boards, and to build campaigns that we will co-fund up to $25 million of our own money to really advertise that the destination is open and all the great things that they have to offer. We're going to work with our supply partners to offer great deals so that we can really put the destination under the spotlight whenever they're ready to accept customers again and give them a nice ramp.
Yeah.
So that's we're going to do hundreds of those around the world as the destinations reopen.
I guess that's going to be key, in terms of recovery. Is this more cooperative? I mean, you have partners in your title, so that very much what you'll be doing, I'm sure, but people coming together to do things together. I mean, destinations will have less money to spend on destination marketing. That's inevitable. They're spending on healthcare and everything else. Tour operators will have, maybe funding will be tight. You guys, marketing would be, so actually bringing it together and forming a kind of cooperative marketing and sales, that might be the way forward.
I have to say that the reaction from the industry, from our smaller partners, larger partners, to collaborating and co-branding campaigns or building collaborative actions has been tremendous. Like it's the time when everybody is coming together thinking, okay, how do we get out of this? By combining forces, instead of saying, okay, if you do this, you're going to get this, I'm going to get that. It's like, no. Let's actually try to get the industry where it should be. So that's for the destination. And then the third part for the partners, so $250 million of investments going to our lodging partners in the forms of marketing credits and commission reduction and favorable payment terms, access to demand data. So that's really a pack that we wanted to build to help, especially the small and medium-sized partners. Now, it's not closed to anyone. Anyone can participate. But the idea was the really, really big chains will have programs of their own, and we're collaborating with them to promote them too. But the smaller guys didn't really have like structured programs, and we thought we could play a role there by giving them financial relief and marketing money to increase their exposure on our sites during the period of the program.
So how did they sort of put together a proposal, put that to Expedia, and that get some sort of approval, and they get the money down the line, or how's that going to work?
Yeah. So first of all, the way it came up was we asked our market management team around the world to tell us, and we did surveys of partners, what would you expect us to do for you during the recovery? And it was pretty broad, the response, obviously, and variety of asks. But it really boiled down to give me the capacity to expose my property higher and more than my competitors whenever demand comes back to my market. And then, if you could reduce my cost at the same time, that'd be great. So we looked at that program. That's how we built that multi-component program to address these two topics. And so how hotels participate, we reached out to them. We reached out to, or we will reach out to them as we roll out the program destination by destination, because it won't get rolled out at the same time, right? So like if a destination is in complete lockdown, there's no point rolling it out. So we will inform all the partners through Partner Central, our partner-facing tool, through emails, through our market management team, through social media, that the program is available to them, and they'll be able to join. So we're giving them these three things. We're asking them to give us competitive rates, and we're asking them to participate in our fence channels, so our member-only deals channels, and our package channel for package customers. So it's a fairly comprehensive and simple program. We're testing it now in Asia. It's getting really good traction, so we're pretty excited about it. And it'll come to Europe, the US, Latin America, when our markets open up here.
Follow the track of the pandemic effectively. So I mean, obviously Expedia can do so much. You've only got so much ability to change things, and you've only got so many dollars to invest in this kind of thing. You're going to need, I think the industry is going to need support from elsewhere, particularly governments and so on. What do you expect to see? We are seeing, obviously, flight providers a huge strain because they simply can't fly anymore. They can't bring their costs down, maybe like someone like yourselves were able to quite so much. Is there a fear that actually what we're going to have a problem with is supply coming out of this? Is that there's going to be plenty of demand, but where is the supply going to come from if we've got routes and flights that just simply aren't operating anymore?
Yeah, I think if you're asking, I would say the most urgent global problem we have to solve is to get flights flying again. Because it's not necessarily because I have shares in the airlines or anything like that. It's because there is so much of the economy that depends on a very liquid flight ecosystem for leisure, but also for business, for culture. And so the longer we're in a lockdown from a border standpoint, the more we're going to have economies that try to rebuild themselves on half the oxygen, which is the domestic oxygen, and not on the other half.
Yeah.
That is, for me, the biggest risk, is that we continue to focus on only domestic strategies without realizing that the world is interconnected and that it goes beyond tourism. It's just, there's so many businesses that are, cross borders. And the fact that we don't have airlines flying at a much, much higher capacity than today is preventing any recovery, basically.
Yeah.
And the longer we wait, the more we are at risk of seeing some airlines go bankrupt if they're not helped by governments or some other schemes. And then when they go bankrupt, it's forever a loss of capacity that, to your point, will take a lot of time to rebuild. So I think for me, what I would really hope is that the governments get together and agree on protocols for airport screening, flight boarding, getting out of the plane, getting in the plane, and basically agree that there is a safe way to travel.
Yeah. And
implement this, because if we don't get there, and if it's one country opening its borders, but there's no protocol to get into that country, or, on the other side, nobody can actually get on the flight, or everybody's scared to get on the flight, we're never going to get there. And I think this should be the number one priority, and at the same time is communicating to travelers that there is a safe way to travel. And you and I were talking about this before we recorded it. If you wear a mask, if you get your temperature checked, if you know the ventilation in the airplanes is at its maximum, which is 15 to 20 times recycling the full air capacity in an hour, so which is much higher than in any other place that we go to, you know, indoors. There is actually a very little chance that anyone would catch the virus if you follow these protocols and if you wash your hands and if you know and if so. I don't feel like it's that hard to provide an experience and some processes for people to fly again in a way that would reduce the chance of getting the virus by 95%. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not a scientist, but these steps seem to be now well understood in a way that should allow governments to issue protocols that would unlock international travel, which I think is going to be a big part of economic recovery.
Yeah, I mean, you said you'd be confident of flying. You'd be a seasoned traveler, so you kind of you'd expect to be confident, but the general population needs that reassurance, doesn't it?
Totally. And I don't see this as just defending Expedia's business or the travel industry's business. It's just you look at, you know, broader. I was doing another interview where just before me they announced that an engine manufacturer in Japan had to lay off 30,000 people. 30,000 people, because obviously there's going to be less flight engines being purchased. But and this is close to the travel industry, but there are other industries, suppliers, you know, subcontractors that depend on this, and it just that's what really worries me, is that we don't get that international travel engine going back on.
Yeah, and actually, when you see what can be done with technology and apps and mobile and managing the experience, there's some areas where we're always going to be with other people in quite close proximity. So within the aircraft, obviously that's inevitable. But airports are fairly large places. There tends to be sort of inefficiencies in airports where we end up all congregated in one place to try to do the same thing at the same time. And it's annoying. It's actually not a great customer experience. So a lot of this stuff is probably forwarding or accelerating something that should have been done anyway to make the whole experience, you know, frictionless, to use the
Totally agree.
Totally. We might just see that happening, you know.
Finally.
Yeah. And out of all crises, I guess there comes some good stuff.
You're right. I mean, then, you know, of course, after 9/11, we went through increase in security check-in and screening, etc., for good reasons. Now we still hate it. There were, you know, the industry is trying to make it better and working on making it better. There's the clear system in the U.S. that is removing some of the friction. So, you know, a lot of this process is being attacked. To your point, now we're going to have more social distancing and some cleanliness measures. That's going to be also implemented in a much more streamlined way. If you look at the hotels, hopefully we're finally going to tackle the contactless check-in and check-out experience, which is only now available in a few, you know, branded apps, etc. But hopefully the industry will move there, which is a terrible pain that nobody likes waiting in a line in front of the front desk. And that's a great opportunity to clear up this one. We talked about change cancel on the airline, you know, models where you need to fill a form or you need to call. Hopefully all this is going to be much more automated. So to your point, some good things will come out of this.
Obviously there's a fear that it'll go the other way and there'll be more friction added into this process if it's done wrong. But I think we'll have to see, won't we, on that?
Well, but I'll tell you that for the airlines and the hotel companies, the car rental companies, to survive, they're going to need to implement it in a frictionless way, because otherwise their operating model, their cost model, is not going to be able to sustain this, or they'd have to increase price dramatically. So I think it forces all of us also to use technology to simplify and to streamline. Otherwise, the cost model doesn't work anymore.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, well, you said the term green shoots, which, you know, everyone's desperate to look out for and hoping it's happening. You got this global view, so you'll have seen what's going on, I guess, if you go east and where the pandemic is further on, and actually a lot of countries have dealt with it, arguably a lot better in that part of the world. So, if we want to talk green shoots, what do you think we're seeing, and where can we look positively for, you know, the near term?
I think we're seeing what you expect. Basically, you'd expect it to be drive destinations. You'd expect it to be vacation rentals more than hotels because people can isolate, and you'd expect it to be, just domestic in general because borders are closed. And you'd expect it to be faster where the regulation has allowed restaurants to open and shops to open and people to travel, etc. So there's no secret to what's happening. You just follow the newspapers and where things are opening up, and this is the pattern. So some Asian countries, like in Korea and Taiwan, you see that popping up. We had an initial spike in Japan, but then it went down again because Japan went into a lockdown or partial lockdown again. In the US, it's quickly opening up also. Vacation rentals first, again, for the reasons I mentioned, and our brand Vrbo is doing great in the US actually. So you'd expect this. And then in Europe, what was fascinating is as soon as France opened up, you were starting to see people booking again and wanting to travel domestically now because the borders are still closed. But now they're announcing that the borders are going to be open June 15th, I think. And you see the public reaction almost immediately. Like they've been dying to travel, so which is good. That's the positive news, is people have been dying to travel, and they're putting travel as, I think in a study that I read, the number one area where they want to spend money right after the crisis. Yeah. Which gives us some hope. But the reactivity, I think, of the demand to the government measures is really, really quick.
So it's almost going ahead of it. I think we spoke before,
Yeah.
The government only has to whisper the word lockdown easing in this country, and and the beaches are full. So, there is a bit of pent up demand there. And actually I saw some figures, I won't say who they're from because it was a competitor, but a bit of sentiment analysis. And they see Europe as having the greatest propensity to travel, or sentiment for travel in the next 6 months compared to Asia and the US. It's on 80% something. So.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, it's not illogical. Like we have our sacred summer holidays in our mind.
Sun's been out in UK, so we're all ready for it. Let's talk about OTAs and the role the OTA will play going forward. I mean, there's two ways of thinking about it. I think something like this can drive people to those big brands. But at the same time, I think we've become a bit more local, a bit more looking around. I mean, you mentioned vacation rentals or holiday rentals. It's going to change the way we travel to a degree, and what we're looking for. Whether that's something to go to an OTA for, I'm not sure. So I can see it potentially in two ways. Obviously, you think that the big OTA is going to do well out of, or is going to sort of survive and then be around to serve the customer. But how do you think the OTA role does change because of what you've experienced?
Well, I don't know if the role has changed that much. I think the role is actually amplified now. And historically, after 9/11, after the financial crisis in 2009, the OTAs have recovered faster than the rest of the industry for a couple of structural reasons. When the industry recovers, typically the suppliers find the OTA channel to be the most reactive and where demand comes, and so they load deals. They want to make themselves visible, so the supply gets better, gets more attractive. And then on the other side, typically consumers want to see what's available. They're looking for deals because they're cash strapped, and they're looking for great value, and they generally go to OTAs to find this. And the shift, there's an acceleration of the shift to online that usually comes in a step function at each crisis. So structurally, I would say the OTA model is well positioned to react. Hopefully through this crisis, we can do even more. We can, again, as I was mentioning, help customers find or understand what the travel providers are doing for their hygiene and health. From a cleanliness standpoint, we can provide them more flexible options. Mm-hmm. We can showcase to them which destinations are opening up and which are not yet open. We can maybe show them the off the beaten track destinations and options that go beyond Cancun and Venice and Tokyo, which I think is an opportunity for these destinations to get on the map also and build brand equity, build reviews online, and so get themselves to be known so that over tourism gets distributed a little better. So I think we actually have a pretty interesting role in this in this recovery.
I wonder if we tend to, it's a movement away, which is what's happening beforehand, to be fair, with personalization, but move away from, look, here's a million results, now have a scan through and decide what you like, to, look, we're only going to provide you with a few curated results based on what we know about you. And it's not so much mass market, it's a bit more niche, it's a bit more personalized.
This is the dream of everyone, right? Personalized options and not millions of options. I think this is independent from COVID. This is a journey that we've been on, and that's why we're aggregating our data platforms and into one, so that we can actually understand the customers better and offer matching supply and demand in a more intelligent way. Hopefully that's going to be accelerated. You're right, because we're focusing on the essentials.
And that's going to require a massive diversification of partners. You talk about, particularly in the vacation rental market, there's hundreds of individual small suppliers out there. I did one of these webcasts with some guys from the industry the other day, and they suggested maybe that some of the big players in rentals might have been stung by this, and they'll go back to more long-term rents, and that kind of march towards the commercialization of that sector may be stopped by this. So you'll go back to more sort of what's really about hospitality, some dedicated short-term let companies who are really dedicated to sort of tourism, not just renting a flat that happens to be in a popular place. So you might get a diverse range of suppliers and partners in terms of this, and some people coming out of the market thinking it's no longer for them. I wonder how you see that panning out, especially if people are wanting to go to areas where it's not so busy and they want to find
I think
quieter places.
Of course I've read the same things that you've read, and we see also in our bookings, we see more long-term bookings on our holiday rentals also. So you understand that, but I tend to see that as a temporary adjustment where people want to go away for a long time because they want to isolate themselves with their families and work from home because now they can, and they don't, they want to change scenery after 2.5 months lockdown somewhere. So you see the surge in long-term rentals, and it's also less exposed to the virus, etc. The impact also of having to clean the room very frequently, and to some extent the unknown procedures or protocols followed by the myriads of holiday rental owners or property management companies, that kind of leads people to favoring more long-term. But I don't know if after we found a cure, a vaccine for the virus, I don't know if these patterns will stay. I think the attractivity of the holiday rental market, the vacation rental market, is there.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that it's the end of short-term rental. I think it's a temporary glitch in the growth.
I mean, people might, for a short time, be put off going to large cities because, again, you're inevitably you're in with a large number of people. So that kind of product might just go down in popularity for a while. But what you're saying is you think long-term it will still come back. It will still
long-term. It corresponds to a need, a price need and an experience need for some travelers and for some trips. It's not necessarily travelers, it's more trip related and travel related. I don't think the need is going to go away. So
I mean, it's going to be interesting to see which sectors of travel come out of this differently. We've got cruise has been very much at the forefront of the news on this, and has got probably a bigger task ahead of it now to reassure people about going back onto cruise ships. You're in cruise in some markets. You're not selling cruise in the UK, and I know that's possible. You could one day do cruise in the UK, but I know you do a lot of cruise in the US. What are your thoughts on how you can help the cruise industry come back?
Listen, I think first of all, do the same thing as we're doing for the other verticals of the industry, which is just communicating what they're doing to ensure health and safety for their guests. And the cruise industry is doing great things for that. So they're adapting. But I would tell you that I'm fascinated by the resiliency of the cruise customer. We're seeing bookings up year on year in 2021 versus what they were for early 2020 before COVID.
Yeah.
So there's actually more people booking 2021 than they were booking 2020 in 2019. Just because the cruise customer, once they've tried it, they like it,
mm-hmm.
and they're just dying to go back on it. And as long as the cruise companies can communicate and provide protocols that make people feel like it's safe, I think they'll just, a lot of them will go back. Now, maybe it won't be 100% of the capacity, but the product is great, and I think it'll recover much faster than what we think because of the bad press.
So does that mean potentially Expedia will look to do cruise in more markets then, if that's what's the industry requires and there's a demand for that?
It'll be interesting. The cruise industry has been the fastest growing industry in travel for several years. It was growing in the 15% range over the last 2 to 3 years. And the only restriction they had for more growth was the shipbuilding capacity. So when you think about that, that means the product is a good product, the experience is good, and there is demand.
Yeah. So
I think that's promising. Now, what's going to be a challenge for them is the government decisions on over-tourism and the potentially restrictions on cruise ships in Venice and other places like that. That may actually be the more risky part of the future for the cruise industry, but the actual pent-up demand is there.
Yeah, and those issues are there anyway, won't they, regardless of COVID? So, you mentioned domestic, and obviously domestic might mean you go by car. So presumably car rental. If people are looking to avoid mass transport and they can sort of isolate themselves in their little bubble, they'll tend to drive themselves. So there's obviously something going to be happening in the car rental sector. It's already big, but it potentially could be more important for you going forward.
I think, we have great partnerships with all the car rental companies pretty much all over the world. They are facing a very difficult situation, and the key to understand the car rental business is, and they'll tell you that much better than me, but they make, they've got 3 types of businesses. One is the airport business, after a flight. The other one is selling used cars, which obviously is a business that is not really happening these days. And the third one is providing a replacement vehicle for people who have an accident. And so, if nobody's driving anymore, there's no accident.
Yeah.
Everybody is cash strapped. You're not buying a car. And if all the airplanes are not flying, there's no airport business. So when you look at it, you're like, this is the perfect storm for a business model. So listen, they're going to have to probably adapt their capacity and rethink a bit their business model. It's going to probably push them to modernize their processes, and hopefully, they'll come out stronger and more efficient, more technology advanced.
Yeah.
But I feel for them because it is a perfect storm.
Yeah. Look, we've done quite a lot of time already. It's gone very quick. But let's just before we finish up, a few more sort of maybe short views on some of the other trends we might see. There's a lot of people sort of saying people will travel less frequently, but when they do travel, they'll travel more intensely because they won't have quite the opportunities as they had previously. And that maybe we're going to see the end of an era of really cheap mass market holidays. Is that something you fear could happen? Is that going to be a good thing? We've talked about the impact of the environment, so maybe we are moving to a more sustainable industry.
Listen, I don't think I'm more qualified than anybody to talk about that. I hope it's not the end of, call it, affordable travel. That's the biggest problem. If you talk about cheap holidays that have a big, environmental impact and don't contribute to development of regions, that's fine. But the problem is if what happens, which is increase in airfare, reduction in lodging capacity, et cetera, makes travel less affordable for the middle class in emerging countries that's been fueling the growth of the industry, that's actually not good. It's not good for the industry. It's not good for humanity because, we all know the goodness brought by travel in terms of being fatal to prejudice, as Mark Twain said. So it would be, I hope that we're not going to an expensive travel industry reserved to the happy few, even if it's sustainable, et cetera, because that wouldn't be good for the world. Now, obviously, making it more sustainable, more inclusive, et cetera, would be great. I don't know if that's coming specifically from COVID. It's got to come from people realizing that we can't, overcrowd destinations like we've done in the past in a way that destroys them, and we've got to do something about it. But I think it's more humanity realizing this than just specific to COVID.
Yeah, and that sort of ties in with what we might see generationally, because obviously this pandemic has disproportionately affected the older person on the whole. They tend to have the time and the money to travel, so it could potentially hit quite a lucrative part of the market. But then we know the millennials and the young generations, they love to travel. It's just they may not quite have the budgets to do the kind of things that their parents and grandparents do. So I wonder, we'll see a generational shift there, do you think? And again, is that going to be good for the industry in terms of profitability and
well, short term, definitely. Short, medium term, you're totally right. You're seeing the younger generation being, more risk taking than the older one, and because that generation goes to less travel destinations, is more, open-minded as to the types of accommodations or the types of experiences that they go through. Definitely distributes whatever demand we have now.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be distributed more than what we had in the past, which was more the classical big, the Paris, et cetera, destination. So I think it's from a recovery standpoint, you're right, the mix is going to change. I'm hopeful that in the end, everybody will travel again. It's not going to be just a young generation, but it'll take time.
Yeah, and finally, on people sort of planning. I mean, I've heard people say that this will make people a bit risk averse in terms of booking far out. And committing to a big plan in months' time and putting money down on that because they think it's unclear as to what's going to happen. So you might see a contraction of lead-in time, which would be tricky for the industry because you do want to have some assurity of business coming in.
I don't think so. As long as we provide refundable options.
Yeah.
So as long as the flights and the hotels and the experience is refundable.
So the industry's got to react to that.
Yes, and we're reacting with our partners to this. There is I don't remember, I saw a study that shows that a good chunk of the emotional value of travel comes in the planning phase, where you dream about it and all the way to booking it and knowing that you're going to go. That provides already, call it a third of the experience. And so I think people want to make plans. They want to have that amazing trip in front of them and talk about it with their families. And so that goes for long booking windows. We still see, of course, the more like practical oriented short booking window spikes in the domestic markets now. So we've got these two types of travel, but I don't think people want to stop planning.
Yeah, good. Well, we'll have to close it there. I know I've been very lucky to attend some of your big partner events in Vegas, which you run. Massive, 4,000 plus people go to those these days, and
those days.
Again, it could be tricky to run at the minute, and maybe if it's happening now, you probably have to cancel it. Are you, just to finally finish up? Are you confident as Expedia that the next time you're able to run one of those big events, you're going to have the numbers there, you're going to be able to get that many people in one place, and that's going to happen, and you've got a positive outlook for the future?
Well, we have to be hopeful for the future. We're in the most beautiful industry out there, so I don't think people will stop traveling. Where there's life, there's travel, as our chairman says. So I think that'll come back. The group thing is obviously a little more challenging, and we'll need the health and safety protocols to make people gather again at that scale.
Yeah.
But definitely when and if we decide to have that type of event again, it'll be in situations where people feel comfortable coming back and sharing all the great stuff happening in our industry.
Yeah. Good stuff. Well, we have to be positive. So, and the sun's shining here, and I think it looks like it's shining in Geneva. So, that's always a good sign, hopefully. Look, Cyril, thanks very much for your time today.
Great.
Appreciate you. Yeah, appreciate you doing that for us, and good luck with everything for the future. Thanks a lot.
Thanks you too. Take care. Bye.
Cheers.